Of the Kaneland District 302 Board of Education is Monday, April 25th. We would like to inform all board meeting attendees that this meeting is being live streamed and archived for access at any time by our community members on the internet within 24 to 48 hours of the meeting's conclusion. This meeting is open to the public in accordance with the current mitigation plan that was approved by the Board of Education on February 14th, 2022. My apologies. Masking will be required at the Board of Education meeting if any school building in the district was reported at a red color the previous Friday, which for this would be April 22nd, and our schools were in the green, so masks are optional at this meeting. And if you will join me for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And a roll call, please, when you're ready.
Mrs. Witt.
Here.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Here.
Mr. Carey.
Here.
Mr. Mankivsky.
Here.
Mrs. Simmons.
Here.
Mrs. Junk and Dr. Lawler are absent.
Okay, with 5 members present, we do have a quorum. Are there any items board members would like to have us consider moving from the consent agenda to new business? Anything? No? Okay, we'll move on. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
So moved. Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Aye.
Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Mr. Mankivsky.
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. We're now to the board and superintendent salutes. I'll turn it over to Dr. Layden.
Yes, I have one that's very happy to be able to share. Based on the parent-teacher organization and the governor of Illinois, they've determined that Teacher Appreciation Week is next week, and it's an annual event. And so it's May 2nd through the 6th, which is next week, with May 5th being Teacher Appreciation Day. So as we've handled and worked through a challenging year over the past year, or 2 years, it's always great to recognize. We've done different groups that we've come up throughout the year and different recognitions for our staff and their hard work. So tonight I'd just like to share a note of appreciation to all of our teachers and their hard work that they have shared over this year specifically and the last couple of years, excuse me, during COVID. So if we do have any teachers, I would love for you to stand and we can give you a round of applause and say thank you. Teachers, come on, teachers. Thank you. We appreciate your hard work, and as I've shared throughout the course of the year, we've recognized other groups for their hard work during the pandemic, and so thank you, and thank you to our entire community. That's all I had.
That's good. Dr. Fuchs?
Not tonight, thank you.
Board members, we good? Okay. Tonight's consent agenda contains the following action items: the approval of accounts payable and payroll from April 2022, the approval of minutes of the April 11th, 2022 regular meeting, the approval of resignations, terminations, and employment of staff, the approval of the student handbook on second reading, the approval of the updated 2021-2022 calendar due to emergency days, and the following informational items: the Freedom of Information Act or FOIA report, the student suspension data report, the 2021 final tax extension report, and the third quarter budget report. So I'll entertain a motion that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved. Second.
And a roll call when you're ready, please.
Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Mr. Mankivsky.
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. This is the first opportunity for public comment. We typically have 2 opportunities for public comment during the meeting, one now and one at the end of the meeting. The board values public input to inform our decision-making and to provide information and insight into what is happening throughout the district. Board meetings are held to conduct the business of the Board of Education and are required by law to take place in public. However, they are not public forums. We use the public comment section as an opportunity to listen to our stakeholders. For that reason, the board does not enter into a debate or respond to questions spontaneously or without proper investigation and deliberation. In most cases, concerns or questions requiring follow-up will be referred to the superintendent. If you choose to speak publicly, we ask that you do so at the microphone, which is over there. State your name and the village of residence or your association with us for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes or less so that all who wish to speak may have that opportunity. Public comment is a maximum of 30 minutes with a 20-minute total length of time for any one subject. You are encouraged to seek a private appointment to discuss matters concerning individual students or staff members. While public education can be an emotional issue, and understandably so, the board strives to maintain a certain level of decorum at the meeting. Those who speak are expected to maintain a tone of courtesy and civility. So with that being said, I will call the first person, and the first person signed up is Rachel Ramos. Or Ramos, did I?
Hi, I am Rachel Ramos. I am the certified librarian at Harder Middle School and have been since 2001. That year, we had 4 schools and 8 library staff, 4 certified and 4 assistants, 2 per building. Since then, we have increased the number of schools to 6 and decreased our certified staff to 1 at the middle school and 1 at the high school, with 1 non-certified staff at each elementary school. Students used to come to the middle school with very strong skills in using the library and the library software. They had strong bonds to books and authors and always talked about favorite books and authors from elementary school. They understood a bit about research and that nonfiction books and databases were used for finding facts. They even knew sometimes that Google was not research. Over the years, I have seen those fundamental skills decline a bit. I spend much time at the beginning of 6th grade reviewing skills that, when our certified staff were being cut, our board was assured would be taught by literacy coaches or reading specialists. But the reality is that those coaches and specialists were not allotted time to add library skills. Our non-certified staff did their best to carry on what had been done before, but nothing replaces a certified teacher librarian. A certified librarian also keeps up with current trends in the field and helps the school and district keep abreast of what is happening. Trained teacher librarians know how to advocate for their programs, as it is part of their job and expectations. They take professional development that adds to their skills and keeps them current. Last month, our library collections were FOIA'd. In this contentious time, who will professionally protect and advocate for the library collections when a challenge occurs? Will you continue to rely on the 2 certified librarians in the district to respond to those challenges? I spend countless hours evaluating the middle school library collection and talking to teachers so that our curated library meets the diverse needs of our population and academic departments. Tonight, the district is asking you to approve the replacement of the 4 non-certified staff with 4 different, inexperienced, also non-certified staff. I am asking you to please direct the district to instead present you with a plan that will begin to build back our elementary libraries with appropriate staff and regular funding. Yes, it will cost money. But take a look at your local public libraries. They are not dying, they are thriving. I urge you as board members to visit our elementary schools and talk with the teachers. Don't rely on district staff to assure you that all is well and that students are getting sufficient instruction and the library collections meet their needs. Ask the teachers what they need in their schools where libraries are concerned and how a certified librarian would help them to meet their standards. I think you might be surprised at what you learn. Mrs. Witt, I remember the year the last certified elementary position was eliminated in exchange for 4 non-certified staff. You were on the board at that time, and your response to the vote was yes with reservation. Only 2 board members voted no. Do you still believe that was for the best?
Thank you for your comments. The next speaker is Jennifer Crocker.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Crocker. I'm going to read a statement for myself and Jennifer Kamek. We each have children that attend both McDowell and Harder. Jen and I would like to urge you to vote no on the proposed support staff reduction in force. The removal of the RTI and LRC staff members listed in the proposal would have a significant impact on every elementary school student in the district. We have been McDowell parents for the past 7 years, which happens to be the same amount of time that Mrs. Chumbley has had the position of LRC assistant. We've seen time and time again how hard she works to get students excited about reading. Mrs. Chumbley runs a reading challenge for her 4th and 5th grade students, which challenges them to read award-winning books during their free time. After each book the student reads, they meet with a staff member who is a book expert to discuss the book. Her book challenge pushes the students to read books that are outside of what they would normally choose. You wouldn't believe how excited these students get about her program. In 2020, when the school shut down, Ms. Chumbley drove to the homes of her students to deliver their rewards because she didn't want their hard work to go unrewarded. At that point in the pandemic, a safely distanced chat with Mrs. Chumbley meant the world to our students. Ms. Chumbley helped our PTO to create and run a pumpkin decorating contest that was based on books, and students and staff love it. She is always willing to offer a helping hand and collaborates well with staff and PTO. She frequently goes above and beyond for her students. Removing Mrs. Chumbley from her position as LRC assistant is a loss that would be felt by all 435 students at McDowell. Please vote no on the sports staff reduction in force proposal. Any offer of a different position within the district would truly be a waste of her many talents, abilities, and the personal bonds she has created with our students. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. The next speaker is Judy Frank. Not here? Okay. So the next speaker would, pardon me? Oh. Okay. The next speaker is Christine Knoll.
I'm Christine Knoll. I am currently the LRC. I work in the LRC at Blackberry Creek Elementary. Thank you for standing, everyone. I am here on behalf of our students. The bonds that we've created. I have over 500 students in my library. I'm going to go to my notes. Sorry, a little emotional. Sorry. Their lives have been disrupted enough with COVID masks and e-learning. A change like this could be significant in an emotional impact on them. We politely ask the board and admin to reinstate our 9 RTI assistants and make them MTSS assistants. We ask them to leave us in the library and continue fostering their love of reading. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. So that is all the people that were signed up. Are there any other people who would like to make public comments? Okay, yes?
Kristen Stalkup, Sugar Grove. I have 3 kids in the district. I would just like to talk on my personal experience with Mrs. Fergus in the library at John Shields. One of the first times that my oldest, who's now in 6th grade, I think he was kindergarten or 1st grade, and as a PTO representative, I went and volunteered at the book fair. And I spent the entire day watching high school and junior high kids pop in to say hello to Mrs. Fergus. And I watched each of them by name, and I watched them sit and talk, not only about books, but about how they're doing in school, how they're doing in life, in sports. She has made a connection with each of her kids over these years. During COVID, my son was part of the reading challenge, and he was devastated that there was going to be no book fair this year. Mrs. Fergus wrote him an email assuring him that he would still receive his reward for all of his hard work in all of the books that he read. And she made sure it happened. The last few years, my daughter Cora is a reader. She inhales any book you put in front of her. At least 3 times a week, I hear Mrs. Fergus's name in my house. And it is with joy, because She has talked to Mrs. Fergus about a new book that she's reading. Mrs. Fergus has introduced her to a different series. Mrs. Fergus is the book chat that she's going to go talk to so she can finish her book challenge program. She's upset that there aren't any more books to read in the challenge. This is her third challenge. She actually convinced her teacher in second grade to let her be part of the challenge when there was no second grade challenge, and Mrs. Fergus let her be on it. My second grader, he is becoming a reader, mainly because of Mrs. Fergus. He asks for her help in the library, and she directs him to books that not only he's interested in, but can be confident in reading. And so I'm with everybody else here. We don't want to lose them. The impact they have on these students is unbelievable because they care not just about the books, but they care about these kids, and they're doing everything they can to foster the love of reading. And we know that reading is unbelievably important when it comes to education. And these, I mean, I have to imagine that the other LRCs are, if they're anywhere near Mrs. Fergus, our kids are being greatly helped right now, and this would be an unbelievable disservice to take that away from them. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Ms. Grossinger, I think I saw your hand.
Tonya from Maple Park. I have 3 kids. One is in first grade at John Stewart, and one will be in kindergarten next year there. And I am here to speak on behalf of our love for Mrs. Carey. She's been amazing to my son. My son has moved from first grade level to second grade level reading, and she's helped him find the books that are there for his level. She has helped him. His obsession with dinosaurs is unreal, and she knows that, and she loves helping him. She met my son when he was about 9-12 months old, and the look on her face the first time I saw her, and she's like, I can't believe Dominic's here. And just the help. He loves the book fairs, all the books that he puts, and she remembers what books that he wants and says, I'm sure your mom and dad will get them for you. She's helped him so much, and to lose her, I don't even want to begin to have to tell him that after the year that we've already had. He's gone from a school that was just kindergarten to here where he's made great friends, and he's really thrived, and I'm happy to say that. And Mrs. Carey has been a huge part of that because my son is a reader, and we need her to stay at the library at John Stewart. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Are there any other public comments? Okay, seeing none, we will move on. So the first item under new business is the reorganization of the board. And we normally like to do this when we have all the board members here. So I would like to move that we postpone this until the next meeting. We can discuss it. There isn't a legal requirement that we hold it tonight, and 2 board members absent, that's almost a third of the board, so.
Do we need a motion, or how do we do this?
So I made the motion just now.
Sorry.
But,
I'll second the motion.
okay. Does anybody want to discuss it, or? Good, okay. So if you want to do a roll call, we can.
Absolutely.
Do we need to put a date on when we're postponing to, official date?
Said next meeting.
The next
So
board meeting.
Ryan
May
should
9th.
pay attention. Is what
And
you're
it is
saying.
important that, I mean, I know with illness and things like that, board members can't, always predict when they're going to be absent, but it is really important that, we're all here. We do need to do it in May because the calendar is dependent on it, so we really need to do it at the next meeting. So, but if you could do a roll call, please.
Mr.
where we are.
Mankivsky.
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons. Aye. Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Aye.
Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. So the next item is J2. is the auditorium lighting.
Yes, thank you.
Over to Dr. Layton.
Yep, I was going to go to Dr. Fuchs in a second, but thank you. We do have a guest, or two guests here that Dr. Fuchs will introduce in a second to be able to answer any questions you might have. But with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Fuchs to lead the discussion.
Thank you very much. Typically, the approval of a bid would be on consent, because by this point in the process, it's a matter of the board approving the low bid. We decided to put this item on new business to give the board an opportunity to discuss and understand how this bid came in. So back in November, when the board approved or directed the administration to move forward with capital projects for this summer, and in this case in the fall, we had estimated that the auditorium lighting would be somewhere between $450,000 and $900,000. We had used a placeholder of $650,000, kind of in the middle. And then, as many of you know, the economy recently has been a little bit unusual in the sense that pricing and inflation is just skyrocketing at this point. So when we received these bids, we received two, and the bid came in at $1.2 million. And I wanted to, I have Dan Critta here tonight from Wold, and Mark Payton, our Director of Buildings and Grounds. Tim Wolliver was supposed to be here, but his flight was delayed, and so he's stuck in Denver for the night. And so, anyway, but Dan is his partner at Wold, and the first part would be is to give Dan an opportunity to help the board understand what changed between the time that the board said, sure, let's move forward with this project, and the time that we received the bid results. And then if the board has additional questions, Mr. Payton and I are here to answer those for the board. So Dan, do you want to talk for just a moment? And you guys, just so that you know, when you talk, go ahead and talk into the microphone. You won't hear it, but it's for the live streaming. Thank you.
All right, well, thanks. I'm pinch hitting for Tim tonight, but I thought I could share a little bit of background. And it's not an unfamiliar story that we're seeing really unprecedented escalation in costs. We're also seeing a real saturation of work in the market, so contractors are being much more selective on what they're choosing. So there's probably three components to this price that had really escalated since our really initial estimates back in November. And prices are changing not just monthly, but it's actually changing weekly. It's really hard to get a handle on what's happening in our bidding environment. But one of the things that came out of, as we developed the project, we understood that there was a lot of coordination, a lot of setup, and a general contractor would have to be involved as opposed to just having a prime electrical bid, which is not unusual for this kind of a project, but because it's in the theater, there's a lot of setup and scaffolding. It made sense, and the electrical contractors that we're talking to told us that they're going to be bidding to a general contractor to kind of have that oversight role. So that was one influence that definitely had an impact to the cost. The other couple things were just the cost in equipment. The lighting equipment was targeted around $450,000. We're seeing that now that if we had a chance to talk to the parent low bidder, that's tracking more in the 550 plus range. So there was definitely an escalation there. And then proportionately, that certainly affects the labor as well. The reason we had two bids is that the market for electricians right now is really tough. They've got their plates are full for the summer, even though this isn't a true summer project. They're filling up their docket for not just the summer, but into the next year. So they're going to be more selective, and you're going to see that kind of a price increase in how they bid their labor. So those are probably the three biggest influences that took that number from those early estimates to where we're seeing it tracking at the bid time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So once we received the bid, we learned that the bid was truly valid. We have the comparative bid that came in at $1.6 million. At that point, we really had to work together to evaluate, move forward, or wait on this project. And at this point, the administration is recommending us to move forward. There are a variety of reasons why, but primarily, the cost is not going to go down. It may only continue to escalate. Additionally, if you'll remember, one of the primary reasons why we are doing the lighting in the auditorium is because it's beginning to fail. It's over 18 years old, and it flickers every now and then, and sometimes the lights go off, then they come on. I forgot, Mrs. Maris is here as well. Sorry, Jill, you can come up too. But Mrs. Maris can explain that the auditorium is really used more than just a couple times a year. Mr. Payton can talk to the fact that the auditorium system, the lighting system, has been repaired multiple times, and it just becomes more and more difficult each time. So additionally, we've got the high school schedule for the auditorium cleared for the time that it needs to be repaired. That's in place. We have lots of things. The bids are done, the drawings are done, all of the hard work is done. So I've provided you a plan for how we will pay for the additional monies. That is on page 2 of your report. I've got the projects in there that we've already bid, paving and seal coating, doors, windows, and the platform lift. If you'll see, we're just short a little over, I just say just, but we're short a little over 400,000. We've got a couple projects that still we don't know, but they're under 80,000. So I wouldn't anticipate those being much more than what we're looking at, hopefully. And then what I did is I put the options at the bottom for ways in which we could support the additional costs. I'm close to within 100,000. For the 100,000 or any of these, we could use that bond and interest money that I'm going to be talking to you about, because that can be used for capital projects. We could use some of the ESSER money, perhaps, which we haven't finished our plan for, but we could incorporate this. This project won't be done until probably, what would you say, January?
End of January.
End of January. So we have a half a fiscal year in which to make sure that we have the money that we had planned in order to use for this project. Please note some of the other things that I have on the potential list. The guardrail for the East Gym, the code has changed, and so for life safety, that's no longer needed. Mr. Payton is working on a ComEd grant, so that's a possibility at about 75,000. We were wondering if the board might consider waiting 1 year for a director of communication. That will give us more time to plan for what that person will be doing. We need additional office space, so that will give us time to plan for that. It's one of those things that we're wondering. The curriculum budget was fully funded at 400,000. We've talked to Dr. Mum and Mr. Raleigh. If we use some of the ESSER dollars to support some of the things that they had planned, that could help make up that difference. The technology budget, as you know, Tim got that large grant of 1.5 million. He still needed his full budget, but we're looking at ways to trim it by about 50,000. Each of the projects in the first section, they all have allowances. Sometimes we use them, sometimes we don't. We won't know until the project itself. But what I did is I took about 50% of the allowances from the projects and added it, and that was about 35,000. I'm hopeful that will help. And by doing so, like I mentioned, we're within about 100,000 of being able to say definitively where that money is coming from. What questions does the board have in order to approve moving forward?
So what about all of the other things that have been waiting? And why is this one jumping up in the line? Because it was not the next thing on the list. So if we have extra money and we can do this to come up with it for this project, why would we not do it for higher priority projects on the list?
Mark, you want me to take that one?
Yeah, if you would, I mean,
Yep. So, at this time of the year, we can't get any more summer projects done. There's not enough time to bid, get the contractors in place, order the materials, and move forward like that. Additionally, it has to do with the fact, if during this time while we're waiting, if the auditorium lights do die, we won't be able to use that space for any of the things that Mrs. Maris has on the list of uses. So it's a combination.
Okay.
Yeah.
And could we hear the list of uses? And, yeah, I mean, curricular ones are probably,
So I went through our combined district-wide schedule and just looked to see what was actually happening in the auditorium. We have our new student orientation, substitute training, nights under the lights, first and second day for all staff across the district where we get together. The first day of school admin meetings with each one of the classes, freshmen, sophomore, juniors, seniors. We have our open house, our fall play, our holiday concert, which is both band and choir. Then we have a separate winter band concert, a separate choir concert, 8th grade open house, Mr. Kaneland, KHS talent show, Harder Middle School and KHS Jazz and Percussion Concert, KAI Fine Arts Festival, KHS Spring Musical, Spring Choir Concert, Spring Band Concert, Academic Awards, Senior Honors, Senior Music Awards, Senior Athletic Awards, grade level presentations that will be happening during homeroom next year. And for each one of those concerts and plays and events, there's usually a week to a month worth of practices that happen during the day, as well as in the evening that use that space. In the past, we have done the district spelling bee in that space. We have made alternative arrangements for next year because it's at the time that the auditorium lights would be worked on if we move forward. In the past, we've also had some of the Harder Middle School band and choir concerts. That has not happened recently because of the magnitude of our use of the auditorium. It's very difficult for them to find an evening that's available for them.
I would say that additionally, this year, they've been using the auditorium as a teaching space for choir due to the COVID restrictions and the need to spread students out, particularly for a class like choir. They've been using that during the day, every day.
so I guess, I mean, I'd like to hear from other board members.
I have a couple questions.
I have what I'm grappling with here is, I don't hear a lot of curricular things besides the band and chorus concerts in that list. A lot of it is extracurricular, and I'm not saying extracurriculars aren't important, but the light board has not failed yet. And if it did, you know, if we roll the dice and it does fail, many of those things could be held somewhere else. I mean, a lot of them, you know, the things that we do there just because we have a nice auditorium and it's a great place to do it, I'm not, you know, especially like, you know, meetings and professional development and things like that. You know, we haven't always had an auditorium. There are other places I think we might be able to find to do them. So I'm a little bit on the fence, and I'd like to hear what everybody else thinks.
Where are we at on the budget tentatively now? You said this is gonna we're short, but overall, where are we at?
For FY '23,
Which is what this would be part of, correct?
that's correct. The original projection showed a projected deficit of about 3.4 million. This year, with any luck at all, we're gonna come in pretty close to maybe a $500,000 deficit, which would reduce that. The agenda item after this is the health insurance renewal. That, we have another, I'm just full of good news tonight. Another $500,000 on there that we didn't expect.
Okay,
So it's right now pushing 3 million.
so next year's projected deficit, including, if we were to approve this, is 3 million.
If I had to say so, yes.
And if we don't, it's 2.4, roughly.
Well, it's minus the 1.2.
Oh, you're right, so,
Yeah.
okay. So you had said, I'm sorry, that there was $400,000 to $500,000 worth of equipment involved in this project?
Yeah, the lighting, the control panel, the dimmers, all that collectively is somewhere in that 550,000 range.
I know union electricians aren't cheap, but what's $700,000? What are they doing for $700,000?
Well, so the general contractor is probably about $100,000 on top of the project for their coordination overhead. There's a lot of scaffolding involved, and like I mentioned, that electricians felt more comfortable, someone else took over that role of oversight. So that had an impact of what we understand from talking to the parent low bidders, about $100,000. The rest of it is, most of it is the labor associated with that. So it's about 500,000 and some change for the labor.
Okay, so when you say a lighting rack, I picture a cabinet or a unit that you disconnect and roll in. So obviously that can't be right for the amount of money. So could you elaborate on what exactly this is?
Oh, well, it involves all the theatrical lighting, house lighting, dimmer panels, control panels. It's pretty much a full retrofit of your entire theater lighting system.
So basically everything in that room that people don't ever see but wonder why they're up there, everything in that room?
For the most part. And
Yeah, and, like you mentioned, the house lighting, all of that has to be re-cabled to take control wiring to. A lot of control wiring done at the theatrical lighting, primarily due to lighting technology has changed.
So when you say that, you mean we have to run new wires from each light back to the cabinet?
Well, back to a point,
Okay.
maybe not back to the cabinet, but yes.
So
yeah.
that's why there's so much labor, is it's
Yeah,
not just
there's
that.
a lot of additional wiring that has to happen due to the technology changes in lighting itself. It's just different now than it was,
Okay.
We're gonna do some LEDs.
Yeah, correct. They're getting it ready for LED lighting, and we will be adding some LED theatrical lighting and LED house lighting.
So you said that someone said the project wasn't going to wrap up till January-ish. Walk me through the labor piece of how this comes together time-wise, please.
I believe the plan is to start right after Thanksgiving, and they'll start doing their demolition and whatnot those first few weeks. And then getting into later December and January, they'll do all the new installations. And then all the finished work that the general contractor has to do, because some of it, lighting isn't, like I said, not the same as it was when they built the place, so they've got to do drywall repairs and things like that to take care of, I guess, masking the new lighting.
So some of this is going to be going on while school is in session.
That's correct, yes.
And during all the holiday concerts and things.
Right, but those have all been moved forward, right? You said November? Forward or back. They've rearranged the schedules and worked it out so that everything
So not
could
moved
take
in
place.
Not moved to another place, moved in time.
Yes.
Correct.
To accommodate the time frame.
Yeah.
So when we received the original projection, it was about half, give or take. Obviously, the GC wasn't taken into consideration initially, right? That's something that's come up. Equipment cost, as a percentage, how much more has it increased from what you guys originally anticipated? I mean, what would we expected to have seen with the initial?
Well, just from the numbers, as a debrief with the parent low contractor, they kind of show their cards and say, this is what we had in for our bid, so we get real data. And it was about 120 to 130,000 different than our consultant's estimate on theatrical and house lighting. So 20, 3 to 25%, somewhere in that range, was the escalation that we saw from back in November to current bidding.
What's
I know-
the delivery timeframe on that equipment?
I think it varies depending on the parts and pieces, but in sitting down with the contractor, they felt comfortable that all the lead times would be well in advance of them mobilizing in November.
So can you, all right, so it would be here by November, but what are they, is it 6-week deliveries on this stuff, 8 weeks?
I think I think some of these things could be 3-4 months. That's why we're bidding it now for that time frame, just because those dates are changing as well, but I think we've got enough cushion where we feel comfortable that what we're hearing is that they're gonna be able to meet those targeted dates for that November mobilization.
That time frame, though, makes it even worse if something happens to the lights and they go out and don't come back on.
No, I get that,
Yeah.
I'm having a real hard time swallowing this number.
I
and
understand.
And you know me, I'm usually pretty conservative with the budget, so I'm wondering if we have the option of buying the equipment now so we have it on hand, and then you said, I know that we could bid this maybe in July or September for the labor to see if we can get a better number on the labor portion of this project.
So my-
Well, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Answer your question. The industry right now is not predicting a correction in the market, whether it's labor or materials. We're not seeing that. And that doesn't mean it couldn't happen a little bit, but I think what you'll see is maybe a slowdown in the escalation, but not a kind of positioning to get to the costs that we were seeing even as late as November this year, or into last year. As far as labor goes, I think that's also a little bit of an unpredictable situation, just because the electrical contractors and all contractors seem like they're filling up their plates well into not just into this school year, but in beyond. So it's rolling the dice a little bit to anticipate that there'd be some labor decrease.
Would it be a fair statement to say that this is the bidding season and most people try and book their contacts, and if we were to bid something, say, September, October, which would be off-season, pretty good odds we might get a better price on the labor?
Potentially.
Okay.
Potentially. I mean, I don't have a crystal ball.
I understand you can't see the future.
I think that we were under the assumption that we would be getting better rates, given that it wasn't during that, the job wasn't during that summer construction time. It was kind of in an off period. So the assumption was that we would get the best possible rates at that time as it was, but you don't know.
Right, no, I understand.
I mean, it's a gamble for us. I personally feel that, well, I can't see the future. I think that construction costs, personal projects we've seen it, lumber, for example, we've seen it come up and we've seen it come down. And I think, I don't know, for me, it's a matter of whether or not we want to gamble on the future, and also at the same time risk the whole thing going down and having to, come in and.
But by the same token, it could continue working the way it is
And I applaud you, Dr. Fuchs, for trying to come up with the funds and the work you did. But to Mrs. Witt's point, these funds could also be used towards other high priority items, rather than paying out a high bid on, or what I perceive to be a high bid. I'm not in the industry, so this may be. But that's just my.
Are there other fixes that could happen if there's certain things that break during this time? Like I said, this is really hard to follow when you said it's an increase by 23%, and that's just from November till now. So we don't know from now till next year, if we were to do this next year instead, what our numbers would be. Obviously, none of us have a crystal ball, but it's really hard to swallow, just like Adam said. So are there fixes if things do break here and there?
I believe we could get house lights turned on and off. Theatrical lighting will be dead in the water. You won't be able to run performances. But if you wanted to bring a class in there for a presentation, I think you could do that. It's not free. We would, it'd probably be a significant expense, but certainly not what this is. But we could get the house lights to come on and off, I think. We wouldn't dim them, but.
Go ahead.
Have we considered or looked at any grant funding from Illinois Arts Council or anybody else in that space?
I have not. I've reached out to ComEd for funding, and they seem pretty positive on the project. And that's listed in Dr. Fuchs' estimates there.
When would you know about that? Or,
I can't really apply for it
Yeah.
until the project is
that's
approved.
what you're, okay.
So it's kind of chicken and egg
Yeah,
thing.
okay.
I don't think I can support this, but if, and I don't know if this part is possible, if we could break it in half, which we probably can't, or if it's possible to buy the equipment now so that we have it and bid the installation later, which would probably break it into 2 fiscal years, and the materials would at least be available to start the project if something were to happen. Which, is either of those a feasible solution?
I'll take a shot at the material. It's possible you could buy the materials now, you'd be just doing a direct purchase. You'd have to bid it, because I don't think we could isolate that in this bid. The way the bid is created currently, we'd have to create a separate bid package that would be equipment only. There's a possibility that you'd have to warehouse that somewhere and then have it on hand for bidding, and then you'd just be subjected to whatever the labor impact is at whenever you needed to bid it. So there is also, depending on how long that is, once you purchase some of these items, from a manufacturer standpoint, the warranty starts upon delivery, not upon installation. We've ran into that with mechanical equipment quite often, where it's delivered ahead of time, and that's the demarc for warranties to begin. So if there's a lag time between the delivery and the actual installation, you might be subject to losing some of your warranty period.
That's one of my concerns. Additionally, we're talking storage space, potentially technology. I don't know enough about this to know whether or not technology is going to go bad, not go bad, but develop further, you know, for a year out. Maybe it's old technology we purchased at that point.
Can it be, you know, there's like the house lights and the stage lights, and you've kind of differentiated between them, and while you're speaking tonight, I assume the biggest money is the theater lighting and the dimmers and all that kind of stuff, but if you did, you know, when you said you could patch the house lights, if you remove those, is there any significant savings?
If you remove the house lights from the project.
Like Ryan was talking about doing it half and half or something, if you could say, okay, we're gonna do the theater part, because those, we'd be dead in the water if something happened, but we're gonna wait on the house lights.
Yeah, there was some discussion about, like, okay, if we remove this piece of the project, the house lights being one of them, that's a possibility. There would be some savings there.
If I remember right, wasn't it 270 or 290?
I'd have to go back and look at the documents.
Let's see if I can find it. I feel like it was about 270 or 290. I'll look and see if I can find that, because we did talk about that.
For just the house lights? Is that what you're saying?
So what's the challenge? So obviously we got to bid for the whole thing, but if we go only halfway and just buy the supplies, the stuff, and then you do the grant for the other half and we get it, like, do we have to then get a second bid at that time to get contractors, to get the labor? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think, if I understand you correctly, we're buying the materials
Right.
now, bidding the labor later.
Right.
Yeah.
If you get the grant, like if you happen to apply for the grant and you get it.
Well, I can't apply for the grant until we install the equipment, because.
Oh, so it's an after effect.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's, what ComEd is looking at is how have you impacted your energy usage, and just buying the equipment doesn't get us there. We have to
Okay.
install it.
I'm
But
not
we
sure that
could-
buying the stuff early is a good idea if you're saying that the warranty starts from the day you purchase. Is that that's what you said, right? So,
Many equipment warranties will start on the point of delivery.
the point of delivery.
We can verify that. I don't know if that would be broadcast
Yeah.
across all the equipment, but that's what we're seeing in mechanical equipment, other things, is that because the same scenario in this market has been tested, and we're finding out that a lot of times that warranty, you'll be doing a disservice to your warranty period just because you're getting delivered, and installation might be 6 months to a year later.
The savings on the house lights would be estimated around $270,000.
Are there other pieces of this contract that we could postpone? Like we could do the wiring and stuff, but buy stuff later, upgrade, this or that later?
I would imagine that would require some re-engineering of the project because they would have to start taking out pieces and what makes sense to do now and what doesn't and that. So,
Yeah, that's fair. The other part of that is, to get your best value on this, you wouldn't want to take the current bids and try to extract it after the fact. I think you'd want to go and rebid the package, so you have the time of re-engineering and repackaging it. It might jeopardize this current year's timeline. It might be something you have to look at in the next year, just because of lead times and the fact that you have to rebid it. I just don't think you'd get fair value if we sat down with the apparent little contractor and said, what do we get back for this? And I know we can get some ballpark figures, but to extract a lot of the work, you might not be getting your full dollar back. That's just more of a heads up.
All right. I guess I still don't quite understand. Is it possible to break this into pieces, even if we have to rebid, that we can keep it close to what we had budgeted? And I know you can't give me exacts, but generally speaking, is that possible?
Well, because I'm pinch hitting, I don't know this is quite the level, the depth of it. I defer to Mark on this, but I would say that as long as the two systems aren't fully intertwined, you probably could try to separate it. What you would lose in efficiency is in the cost of that remobilization, because if there's scaffolding and wiring, or if they have to do some kind of destructive investigation to get to places with new wires, that would have to happen once and then happen again, so you'd lose some economy of scale.
Understood.
But otherwise, Mark probably can be more specific.
Yeah. Like Dr. Fuchs said, we could remove the house lights. They're thinking that'd be around $270,000. But you really can't, like your dimmer rack itself, you can't like replace half of it, you know what I mean? So a lot of it is pretty intertwined. Even the house lights are intertwined in the whole dimming system. We could maybe separate those out, but it's kind of a fairly complex system that we're.
I know we're not talking about simple things. That's.
Yeah, it's not just changing out light fixtures in a classroom, or we just won't do these 6 classrooms this year. We'll do those 6, but not these 6. It's kind of an all integrated system.
Can you refresh for us too, so how old is it? How long do they usually last? Or is the flickering the only thing you're seeing? Have you had a professional take a look at it and say it's on its last legs or it's not? Because it hasn't failed yet, so.
Yeah, we have had Schuler Shook, the engineering firm that helped us design this. They've looked it over. I know myself, I've had to go to eBay to get parts to keep certain pieces of it running. It's original to the auditorium, so was that 2004? So we're approaching 20 years old now, and typically for a technology like this, you're doing pretty good.
Yeah, that's fair. The technology in lighting has really gone to another extreme as far as simplicity and efficiency and just benefits, how you can control it, and the advantages of having a more robust system.
Are there energy savings that we might see that would offset some of the purchase price? Like by having this new system?
Yeah, there are energy savings.
I mean, they're not that significant, I'm sure, like.
Yeah, they're not
what we were
gonna.
hoping for, but.
They're not gonna make a significant dent in the purchase price, but there would be energy savings, certainly.
Board members have other questions? We want to talk about it more?
If I had to vote on it right now, I'd say no. I would support removing the dimmer rack and doing that portion of the project, which brings us in roughly $940,000 would be the remainder, which Julianne has explained where that money can come from, and I've been pushing this project down the road for years. I know it needs to get done, but I feel more comfortable, especially with that deficit number that we're facing.
I want to remind the board too, we're coming back at the end of May to plan for summer of '23 because of these price increases and the amount of high needs or serious needs that we have in capital projects. The HVAC system at Meredith needs to be replaced. The track needs to be replaced or surfaced. The parking lot at Meredith, the parking lot at Shields needs complete replacement like Stewart. We just have an abundance of capital needs. And I feel like we've come so far on this lighting project that to stop now and start all over, you're gonna have to pay for another engineer, another at least update of the engineering costs, the architectural costs, the bidding, when they prepare the bid documents, the bidding process. I just hope that if we wait, that we're making good decisions long-term, knowing everything else that's coming. We do have, again, that bond and interest money that we're gonna be talking about, that if we wanna take all of it and help offset the costs, we could do some of that. You've got some ESSER dollars that we can use. The priorities are just starting to stack up to the point where to not do it, I'm not sure if that's irresponsible or not. But if we can live without it, then we should, but
How much money do we have tied up in getting to this point?
great question. I don't know off the top of my head.
Well, it was 50 for the study,
Yep,
and the fine gentleman standing there's firm is charging us something or another.
yep. Do you,
Well,
It'd be-
I don't know exactly amount. We would have charged on the original estimate.
Let me
So the
rephrase.
percentage of our,
If we have to redo this a year from now, how much more do you think we would be charged?
well, we would basically take it on more, if it sounds like the direction you're heading, we'd do more of a repackaging fee. Because the engineering is basically done. If we start changing the strategy, that's different. But if you're just kind of trying to divide up this package into different pieces, we would just have a repackaging fee, and I would have to
Okay.
talk to our consultant. Schuler Shook is our theater consultant, so I wouldn't want to step over the line and speak for them, but we would have to get fair cost from them too. But
I bet
it certainly, it'd be cost effective unless you're gonna rethink the entire package and start taking a different strategy.
So,
maybe 100,000?
so if we break it down to take out the rack, we're at 300,000 off, there's 100,000 we'll have to spend again. I guess I'm comfortable with that.
And there's no other, like, the type of technology that you're buying, obviously, what kind of level is that? It's not the best of the best, but it's obviously not the cheapest. I mean, is it a middle ground? Is there
Well,
ways to save there?
I can speak in generalities. These systems are you can plug and add more things onto them, so you're basically purchasing the base system. I don't know how many, and if there's extravagance to what you're adding onto it. I would guess it's gonna be, the norm would be to have a really good base system that you can decide to enhance later down the line. But I don't know if, Mark, that's fair
Yeah,
assessment.
and that's accurate. We're getting a good solid base system. We do have some LED lighting currently that's wired uniquely. So this would integrate it into the dimmer system appropriately. And then it would allow us to, as lighting fails, like the theatrical lighting, as that fails, we can replace it with LED lighting, and we're already wired up, and you just plug it in and go. We can mix and match the old technology and new technology.
So the bid as it is now is just a base system? There's not enhancements on it now that we're adding in?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I will personally, my son is in this world, so I know a lot about that part. And back when he was in high school, it was outdated. It was, when he was working on it, he tried to do some stuff, and it was just completely outdated back then. So the fact that if you guys have been holding off on and on, if we could find a comfortable number, I mean, this is definitely hard to swallow, that number is, but
One thing that comes to mind in this discussion is, you mentioned earlier the economies of scale. So, if we do this portion right now, and then we go out to bid for the other portion later, we could potentially be spending $3 million on a project, if they bid higher next time. They gotta take down the scaffolding, they have to bring the guys in, they gotta get a GC to plan. So, initially I was leaning one way, but now I'm considering that, if it has to get done, I don't know. It's tough.
Well, that's part of the challenge of us bringing this initially, because like Dr. Fuchs said, with 3 or 4 other large outstanding items or projects, those will be following. So if this one's not done at this time, it will eventually follow. I guess it's the gamble that we typically don't take as administrators. We don't gamble that we're going to be able to do this cheaper and later. So with what we have right now, and knowing that there are some dollars built in, and knowing this has been not waiting 19 years, but we're at year 19 or 20, that's part of the rationale of bringing it. And to have a facility like that that's not used regularly or often as we're going to, that's the challenge of having it vacant if we don't have the proper lighting. That was our challenge bringing it forward. And then the challenge of the other items, those are all priorities also, but to balance those to make this happen is what we regularly do in any capital outlay project.
Do we have the opportunity to rent out the auditorium space, say on weekends and things like that for business meetings or other types of things? I know Batavia has the same, it's a little bit bigger scale than ours, but it's the same.
I remember talking about.
It's the same auditorium
Yeah.
style and everything, the pit works the same and everything. And they actually have a person who is on staff who rents it out, and their salary is paid by that plus more. So
I
I'm
know
wondering if we have that opportunity.
Yep, I'll have Mrs. Maris address that one, because I know that conversation has come up at different times because of the facility. It's such a nice facility, and maybe the needs of it, or those that might be interested in it. But Jill, can you recall what those conversations have been?
Absolutely. I think the main concern would be that we'd need an auditorium manager to be able to facilitate the rentals agreements with that, and just the upkeep of the space, and making sure that it's well-maintained when it's being used. That's a need that we have even for our own staff using the space. It would just grow larger as you had others coming in to use the space.
We currently pay somebody by the hour to do it, a teacher usually.
To like clean it and prep it?
Prep it, yes.
Run the lights, the sound system,
Exactly.
program the
Yeah.
machines as need be there to just welcome and turn everything on and off, lock
Kind of a
everything up.
theater manager on demand.
Yeah.
For the events that are hosted.
There's a lot of equipment behind the scenes, the props and the mics and things like that also have to be inventoried and maintained.
have you guys looked into that before, of using it as a financial support? Because obviously there's other things that could be updated, and if we were making money, like have you talked to Batavia, how do they manage it? What does a manager cost compared to money they're bringing in, to all that?
We really haven't, because early on, we were using it, and additionally, the more use you have, the quicker these things wear out, and we didn't know when we would be able to replace it. We finally have the money to replace it, and so maybe the opportunity when we get it replaced is to do something like that. But we have to make sure that the rentals cover the cost of the person.
I just didn't know if
and
we were
that
out
they
in
don't-
Kaneland, too.
Right,
How many
and that-
people want to use
Yeah, how many
Kaneland?
people want to drive out
Right.
here?
Batavia is different.
Exactly, because
Who
it's
wants to
more
drive out?
populated.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But as Mrs. Maris explained, we have a lot of use of it of our own. So,
Another thing to consider, just throw out there, is that the paving and seal coating bid came in at 214 under. So I know, when I first looked at it, I saw 650 compared to 1.2, but we did get a little bit of savings there. So just a thought.
I'd hate for us to kick the can down the road again and have it backfire on us. And another couple of years before the CPI comes in with a higher, that would increase our revenues
Right.
to the point that maybe by then, some of these other projects would be better funded by the additional revenue. I don't know.
Yeah. So in December 22, we'll do the levy for the 23-24 school year. That's when you'll start to see the additional money, which by that time,
But we don't,
right now, all of our costs are going up, all of them. Energy costs, labor
And
costs.
it's not extra, it's just
Exactly. Right now.
right-sizing the budget to match the costs. So-
Yes, yes. Right now, there's not a day that goes by that something doesn't increase, and I have to try to figure out how are we gonna pay for that? So, it's that time of year, though, where we're really tightening the tentative budget, trying to figure it out. So, yeah, I know.
But everyone feels strongly that it needs to be done now? I guess.
I do.
Yes.
I think one of the concerns that we've had is that anytime you prepare for a play, even if you're preparing for a concert, there's a lot that goes into the work of just setting up the stage that you can't easily just pick it up and move it. So if Friday night, if the lights would have gone out, we would have not have had a production after months of preparation. And I think the same is true for our band and choir concerts. They do utilize that space of having the concerts where the kids are literally walking around the whole parts of the auditorium, up in the balcony areas and things. So it's not just an easy, we could pick it up and move it to another spot.
Any other questions? Okay.
well, I guess, is there any support for taking the lighting, or what was it, the piece?
House lights?
The house lights out of this? Or am I the only one that thinks that we should do that?
I feel there's risk in it of it going up, and like Mr. Gonzalez was saying, having to erect all the scaffolding and everything again.
I will say that there is issues with the house lights as they exist now. There's a flickering that happens, and it's like a moving target. So you'll fix one and another one starts and things like that. It has been brought up that there's a concern about safety for patrons when they're in there. That flickering could trigger seizures. I don't want to be an alarmist or anything, but it has been brought up that there's concern about that. So when we remove that piece of it, we're not fixing that piece either.
The stairs?
I was asking Emily Van der Linder about this past weekend, and she said that the stair lights don't come on all of the time, which is also a safety issue. They're unpredictable.
Okay, so I'm just going to try this. I'm feeling a little different about it. So I move that the board directs the administration to execute a contract with Light Construction for the installation of replacement of the auditorium lighting system in the total amount of $1,227,700 and $700. Is there a second?
I second it.
Is there any further discussion? Okay, let's put it to a roll call, please.
Mr. Carey?
No.
Mr. Mankowski?
No.
Mrs. Simmons?
Aye.
Mrs. Witt?
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez?
Aye.
Motion carries 3-2.
I'd like to thank the board and our guests for working through this challenging issue. We will certainly take good care to make sure that we watch the overages and things like that, and that this project gets done appropriately. Again, it will be happening from right after Thanksgiving through mid to late January. So, thank you very much for the
I
discussion.
appreciate the board's discussion because I know even the yes votes are kind of, yeah, heavy.
Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
So now we are on J3, which is the approval of the health insurance renewal.
Dr. Fuchs oversees the insurance committee and comes back with the annual recommendation and updates. So with that, I'll just immediately turn it back over to Dr. Fuchs, and you can walk us through it, please.
Great, thank you very much. As I mentioned, and as you've read in the board memo, the health insurance renewal, I give you a lot of information so that you can see kind of what we've done with the year. If you start on the first page, you can see that we are up from 486 to 497 total employees and 18 new dependents throughout this year. So our total dependents went from 777 to 795. So we are covering more people on our plan. We have had a rough year on the plan. If you turn to page 2, we are a self-funded health insurance plan. We keep an employee benefit trust fund where all the money from both the district and the employees towards the health insurance is kept in a separate fund. It's reported for you on each treasurer's report. Last year, this time, the fund balance was about 2.1 million. We're currently sitting at 1.2 million. The recommended amount is between 3 and 4 months of claims, which would put us at 2.4 to 3.2. Our average increased approximately $100,000 per month from last year to this year. So 85% of our costs are directly related to the claims. 15% are the fixed costs. The fixed costs from last year to this year did not increase, but maybe 0.5% at most. It truly is the claims. One of the thoughts is that during COVID, people did not go to the doctor. They did not choose to have elective surgeries, elective testing, things like that. And we're starting to see that for this year, and that we think is some of the costs. I also included the chart on the last page that our broker put together for us. You can see that inpatient admissions increased 30%, and then outpatient paid per visit increased 2.5%. Our outpatient visits actually increased, though, 31%. Our pathology and lab increased 40%. So you can see the usage has significantly increased. This usage and our increase in claims is what has impacted the renewal amount. This year's renewal is 11.7%. About $1 million of the $1.2 million is the board's portion of that increase, which is a little over $500,000 more than what we projected. We typically project 5% in the financial projections, and so this really, again, is an increased cost that we always hope comes in under. Last year it did, this year it didn't. You can see on page 4, our overall increases for the past, 9 years has averaged 4.8%. If you put this year's increase in there, over 10 years, it's been 5.5%. So while this is a larger increase than we like to see, our average over time has been very stable. So I do feel good about this. It hasn't been that long ago, though, since we had a high increase. And I am working with Hub, who is our broker, to help stabilize some of these increases to get a little bit back to where we were, I would say 14 through 29, or 2019-ish. The thing is with 85% of the costs being claim-driven, the claim estimates come from Blue Cross Blue Shield and their underwriting department, and they are generally very accurate. This year, I don't think anybody expected the increases in claims that we have seen. We still have a specific stop loss with a deductible of $175,000. We're looking at about 3 people this year who are hitting the stop loss. The tier structure was developed in 2011 and has worked very well since that time. The multipliers for those tiers has stabilized, and so they have not changed, and they are not changing for next year. You can see on page 5 how many people, employees in that, are in each group, each tier, and what the change is. The family tier has actually decreased by 9 employees, whereas the single tier increased by 14. So in terms of costs, that's a good thing. The Health Insurance Committee has met this year. Mr. Gonzalez has served on the committee as the board liaison. We have focused on employee wellness, especially in light of COVID-19. We've begun sending out weekly wellness messages. We've explored 2 optional benefits of accident insurance and critical illness insurance, and then continue to look at the plan opportunities for plan savings. With regard to the optional benefits, last year the board approved a life insurance plan with a long-term care option, and we had quite a few employees take advantage of that. Those optional benefits are not paid for at all by the district, but completely supported by the employees who select the optional benefit. We had a turnover in our Kaneland Employee Benefits Administrator. Our administrator last year, Eileen Bretman, retired in December, and Barb Bradford has replaced her. And she is doing a great job. She's worked in the district a long time and is very familiar with the benefit package. The committee is recommending that the board approve 2 more, those accident and critical illness insurance, and that Voya be selected as the vendor for that. When we looked at pricing and options, they had the best opportunity for our employees. In May, the committee is going to meet again. We are going to look at 6 different options for potential savings to the health insurance plan. So while those savings, if we recommend them to the board and I bring them back to the board, those savings would help to increase the fund balance in the KEBTF. It would not affect the premium at this point. Once the board approves the renewal tonight, the premium will be set, and we'll start to process all the payrolls for that in June for July. But if we decide and recommend some savings, if we see that those savings happen, because everything is dependent on what the employees end up doing, and I'll be able to share more once we know which savings are going to get recommended. Those savings that we would see would help to refund or increase the fund balance for the KEBTF. Let's see what else I have for you. Affordable Care Act continues. We receive updates. Specifically this year it was on COVID. And I also would be remiss if I did not thank my co-chair, Patty Reeder, and the committee members who have served. John Ahern, Travis Berth, Barb Bradford, Eileen Brutman, Judy Frank, Kelly Gavin, Rebecca Kennedy, Christy Kukovic, Kirsten Murphy, Lisa Pitstick, Tiffany Reuter, and Renee Wooten, with again Mr. Gonzalez here. Our brokers are from Hub. We've been fortunate that they've been consistent over time. Next year will be their third year of the 3-year contract. So in the fall, I'll ask the board if they want to renew for 2 additional years or if they want to go back out to the market for pricing. We can have up to 5 years or more on a service like that. So at this time, I'm asking that the board approve the recommendation for the premium increase and then to add the 2 optional benefits for accident and critical illness insurance.
Adam, did you have anything you wanted to add since you were on the committee?
So the big thing, she mentioned the 6 savings options that were presented. I think the key will be employee engagement and education in understanding that, you know, actually interacting with, because it's based on the amount of participants that enroll. And so the more they understand, hey, if you do this, in the end it'll end up saving, you know, because we're self-funded, it's a community thing. I think there's a lot of potential. With regards to the 2 additional benefits that are employee paid, the VOIA, I will say that VOIA, and I think that they mentioned in the conversation that this company is pretty aggressive, so that the vendor they chose on all different, it wasn't like they had to pick and choose, it was kind of a no-brainer in terms of going in this direction, and I think it's an excellent opportunity. And again, for us, I hate to take this perspective, but really no cost for the district, it's all important.
Yeah.
So currently, the insurance is, if the spouse is added on, it doesn't matter if they even have their own insurance through their work, or?
That is correct. And the committee studied that last year, a spousal fee or not allowing them. We had the cost estimates from last year. At that time, it was, well, last year we didn't have the increase that we have this year. And so it is something that we can revisit as a plan change. It also is subject to bargaining. So there's a little push-pull for making plan changes.
But to like Mr. Gonzalez's point, I think the more communication out to them, so if it is employee and spouse,
Yep.
then they're both going to support each other, they're going to encourage you, you know, so it'd be interesting to see what those, you know, really what is the cost, just because we had the spouse on it, but it might in the long run be more helpful to us.
Yeah. The good news is that when we look at the top, 20 claims, most of them are not the spouses, it's the subscribers. So, because that was what we were looking for, is who are our high-cost people? And in most cases, it's the subscriber. There are a few spouses on there, but not in abundance.
And just to clarify, when you talk about the spousal thing, what we're talking about isn't like saying, oh, you can't have a spouse, your spouse on it. What we're saying is if they have their own insurance offered through their own employer, then they would not be eligible to be on our insurance with their spouse who is our employee.
Yeah, or
there's a fee.
Or they, right. There's a couple different ways to go.
Okay.
Yep.
I just didn't want it to get out there that,
No.
it's something else.
Thank you.
So,
And the comment I have is I think at some point we should revisit what number we use for the average for your budget purposes.
Yeah, next year, maybe I'll increase it to 7. The one year that I did, though, it came in at 3. Do you remember that? And I'm like, I know.
Yeah,
So I'd be happy to increase it, because then it'll give us room on other stuff. So I'll make a note of that in the finance. Is 7 better? Where would you want to see it? Because I can take notes of that right now for the future.
7.5.
Pardon?
7.5.
7.5. What about the rest of the board? Move it up?
Would there be anything we could get from either Hub or the insurance company as far as what they might recommend to or what they're seeing, or any fair estimation into the future?
Yes, but if you want anything close, we have to wait till like February of the year for our numbers. That's when we get a preliminary. So if you look, the 5% is our 9-year average with that 4.8, and our 10-year is 5.5.
Yeah,
I know,
but since 2020,
2 out of 3.
yeah. So definitely we can increase it. It's
Rather
a
than
projection
just-
that we can use as a placeholder. It doesn't hurt anything when I do that, except it gives us a little room if it comes in under. And it certainly helps in tonight when it's double.
I guess I'd like to see, rather than just pull a number out of the air like 7.5 or whatever, I'd like to see it based on the actual average, the actual data. And, you know, either say we're going to do it in the most recent 5 years or something, or,
Can we,
what's that work out?
can we price out what reinsurance would be at different stop loss levels?
Yeah, we've
Which
increased,
would give you a very good indicator of where the market is going. Especially if you, like, a contract for 2 years or 3 years.
yep, we just increased the stop loss. Hang on one second, I put it in here. In January 2020. So 3 years, maybe next year will be time to increase it again. We generally have increased it about $25,000 every 2 to 3 to 4 years, depending on how it's going. So, because,
In other words, the stop loss in set point?
yes.
Okay.
So like right now, it's at 175,000.
Yeah.
The last time I believe it was 145 and 125, so, and we've done that over time.
Because I know several districts have their recontracts for, the reinsurance contracts for 3 years out. And there's plenty of market available right now, so, okay,
Yep.
okay.
So I'll make a note, we won't be doing it for this upcoming,
No,
but,
not for this upcoming.
but definitely
For
start in the
looking-
fall.
Looking further on down.
That's
the
right.
horizon, yeah.
We'll get pricing again for that, because it'll be time.
So if we use the last 5-year average, my math comes out to 6.84,
If you use how many?
last 5.
Last 5. So is 7, or do you want 6.84?
no, I mean, we can, it doesn't have to be exact. I just didn't want it to just be something we,
Based on something.
Yep,
yeah, I just wanted it to be based on fact and data.
got it. Be happy to. Because I do not
Anybody
like
else want
being
something else that's,
double.
yeah.
It's a little stressful.
And the catastrophic claims have been pretty stable, those numbers have been pretty stable?
Yeah, last year we only had 1. This year, we've got the 3.
Okay. but
Yeah, and when you say catastrophic, I'm just talking that they hit the stop loss.
that
Threshold.
You incept the stop loss provisions
Yeah.
or policy limits, that stuff that's not covered by your
Yeah.
your reinsurance, okay?
Other questions? If there are no further questions, then I'll entertain a motion that the Board of Education approves the following 2 recommendations from the Health Insurance Committee. The first is that we approve the premium increase of 11.7% for the 2022-2023 school year. And the second is that we direct the administration to add the optional benefits for accident insurance and critical illness insurance, both with the vendor Voya for employees at the employee's expense. The district would not be responsible for paying any portion of the premium or related fees for these policies.
So moved.
Second.
And a roll call, please.
Mr. Mankivsky.
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Aye.
Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Okay, we'll move on now to item J4, which is the approval of the resolution authorizing notice of non-renewal of identified support staff.
Yes, thank you. With that, Dr. Atkins comes up annually for a couple different meetings for presentations, and this is one as needed. It typically takes place in April, so this follows a timeline that we have typically followed as a practice in our district. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Atkins.
Thank you. Good evening. So as the board recalls, we have been talking with the community and the district about the Kaneland Connects plan, and one of our prongs being the MTSS program. We've had an MTSS steering committee that's been meeting for over 2 years and has provided a shift for us to comply with the Illinois law, pushing for MTSS services within a school district. That steering committee chose a model that utilizes certified staff. At the minimum staffing plan this year, we talked how those certified staff would be supplemented by the existing RTI paraprofessionals so that we could build that program, comply with that law, comply with what the MTSS steering committee has designed without incurring cost. At that time, I did share that we were not anticipating a reduction in force, but that everybody would be provided positions here in the district for next year. We do have plenty of positions, so I want to make sure that that's abundantly clear. However, in subsequent planning for our staffing process, we do the certified first, and then in March and April, we do the support staff. And looking at the type of programming we're going to be having next year, there's 2 prongs that we have to look at with staffing. One is from the state in terms of what qualifies for a reduction in force. And when you change programming, it triggers a RIF consideration. And then when we combine that with the procedures found in the SPEAK contract and the classification of employees in Group I, which would be the LRC assistants and the LRC assistants and the RTI assistants, we would have to conduct that RIF, and it would affect that category because that's the category that the RTI assistants are in. With that then said, there are those 9 positions. Remember, there's 10 LRC slots in the district right now. 1 has been unfilled all year. So there are 9 remaining, 8 at the elementary, 1 at the high school. Those positions are being reduced in force. However, because of the process we have with the SPEAK organization, it is done by seniority. So we are releasing 9 staff members tonight. They're in the resolution that you have in front of you. Then those staff would be subject to recall to available positions. The more senior people within the classification do have an entitlement to positions within that classification. A common term you might hear is bumping. They do have that ability to do. It's their entitlement through the contract. And then as we place people, those senior people have that bumping authority. And then we have recall in reverse order of seniority for those people that have been released. There is a formality component to this in terms of fulfilling the requirement of the law. At the same time, because of the way this works and the procedures involved, we do have some displacement of people from positions that they've typically been in. In some respects, this would be akin to a classroom teacher who's been second grade at a place for a period of time, having to move to a different building or a different grade level within that building. So although unfortunate, it is a byproduct of the process we have to follow. So that's the resolution we're bringing forward to you tonight to reduce and force those 9 people. Please know that we plan to initiate the recall process right away and start bringing those people back.
Okay, I wanted to add a little bit of historical perspective as well from a board standpoint. So I have been on, I think, all of the SPEAK negotiating teams. You know, the seniority negotiation topic is usually brought to us by the bargaining unit. That isn't something that management usually brings forward. But it's a typical union, you know, thing that seniority matters. The categories were mutually decided upon, but with a heavy emphasis on, you know, what the SPEAK bargaining unit thought was appropriate. I mean, management also had say, of course, because we wanted to say, well, you know, you don't want to have cooks in the same category as library assistants and things like that. So, you know, it was mutually agreed upon, and it is contractual. So The MTSS change is state mandated. It was part of our strategic plan. It's one of the 5 prongs of our strategic plan, which was board approved. Then the MTSS change, we've known that there was a RIF involved in the change for a little while. And before that, we knew that there were going to be position changes anyway. So that was also board approved. And, you know, and no one is saying anyone isn't valued. We understand, it feels odd, especially if you're not a person in a bargaining unit. I was telling someone it felt kind of like a weird episode of Survivor, you know, you're voted off the island, you know, kind of thing where people can bump other people. But it is in the SPEAK contract. It's been in the SPEAK contract since, for 2-3 years now.
4.
And, you know, I would assume that the SPEAK leadership, as people are hired, has them familiarize themselves with those categories. And, you know, people should be aware of what category they're in and who has bumping rights. It's not a good thing, you know, and while we talk here tonight, we are talking about positions. We are not talking about people. We value everyone. We know that everyone is doing a great job. That isn't the point. But if we were to not follow the seniority guidelines, we would be in violation of labor laws. It would be unfair labor practice. So this is somewhat of a necessary evil. And at every step of the way, it has been board approved. To yank the rug out from underneath tonight at the one little stage before full implementation doesn't seem fair. If there was an issue, and I understand, you know, I don't know every aspect of the contract, and I understand that we may have been taken aback by how things played out. But, you know, that's on us to familiarize ourselves with the contract as well, and to have known earlier and to have made, you know, said something earlier. It's a 2-year steering committee with a 1-year delay, I believe, so it's been actually 3 years that this has been in the planning. It's unfortunate. I just wanted to give that historical perspective and kind of the, you know, it isn't management saying, we believe that, you know, people with seniority should be able to bump these people. It is contractual in the bargaining unit contract.
Can you explain who SPEAK is?
SPEAK is the Support Professional Education Association of Kaneland. It is a variety of what we, in public schools, you have administrators, certified teachers, and educational support professionals. These would be the ESP side of it. Not all ESPs are in SPEAK. Transportation technically is an ESP, they're not in SPEAK. So anybody who's not a teacher or an administrator, SPEAK consists of food service, administrative assistants, health and nurses, health assistants and nurses, paraprofessionals, RTI assistants, and LRC assistants.
Security. So President, so when they're hired, are they given the contract? How are they notified?
The contract's available to them. It's online. It's available at any time. They know what they're hired for. Some of those pieces, there's a delicate balance between what my role is in explaining a union contract versus what the union's role is in explaining that contract. But we tend to make sure that they get that information. They have an informational meeting every year that we do not attend, but we provide time for those first 2 days of school to go over these kinds of things. It's our assumption that they do. I don't know that it's prescient. I would make, thank you for your comments, Mrs. Witt. I would make 3 additional pieces to add to that. One, this is what's called an honorable reduction under the law. The people involved have done nothing wrong in this, and I want to make that abundantly clear. This is not about evaluation or efficacy. And then secondly, I'd also want to mention that within that classification, the contract's been alive for 4 years. We've bargained it 5 years ago in preparation for that 4-year process, And 5 years ago, when we were bargaining this and talking about classifications, MTSS wasn't on anyone's radar. Not at all. So the classification at the time made sense in many respects. So when we talk about the mutual bargaining process, please know that there was no knowledge of these kinds of shifts 5 years ago bargaining this contract. And then the last thing that I would mention is akin to the honorable component. The people involved are excellent. And I think we've heard that, we've seen that, we've heard that from the community. We've received communications throughout the last week from a variety of people involved in this. And I shared with the affected staff last week when I was asked, well, you know, I'm not a such and such, how am I going to do that? And I shared that there's two prongs to an educator. One is the art and the other is the science. The science side of it is something that we all learn, grow, and can be trained on, okay? But the art piece, you kind of either have it or you don't, and that's what makes or breaks an educator, and every single one of these people have the art piece. So although they may have signed on in a certain role, although that role may be, through this process, not something available to them in the coming years, that's unfortunate. As you mentioned, it's a process, it's a procedure, it has to happen that way. At the same time, because of that art, these people will be able to bring that with them to whatever role they have. So all the passion we've heard from people, I completely agree that they're great educators and they connect with kids, which will be able to happen in all the variety of roles that we have. So I take very little solace in the whole process, but I take an element of solace in that. So I would want the board to know that it's an honorable reduction, that these are people with immense amounts of artistic skill in education that they will bring to whatever role they have.
And also, we are currently in bargaining with Speak Right Now, and Appendix A is on the table. So if there are Speak members who familiarize themselves, and they should take their concerns to their leadership as we negotiate. So.
All right, so some of this may be repetitive. So roughly 5 years ago, we signed a collective bargaining agreement with Speak, which included Appendix I, which at the time, to the best of our knowledge, the groupings in there made sense. That putting the RTI / now MTSS people in with the library staff, there's other groupings in the contract that people are dissimilar but not that far off, that it kind of makes sense. 3-ish years ago, the laws changed, and there was changes in the MTSS program and how services had to be delivered to students. So the administration and staff had a steering committee that decided that the best way to serve the needs of the students in the future was to use certified staff in the classroom, which is a programming change, which led to the need of more teachers and the need of less paras, which is a decision that the board and the administration have made over the past years, which leads us to people that don't have the job that they wanted or had, which leads us to the union contract, which says that the people that have been here the longest get to pick what jobs are left over in that group. Is that correct so far? So it's not that the board wants to take the people that are in the library jobs out of the library. We're contractually obligated to offer those positions that are left in that group to the most senior people in the grouping. Now that we got rid of the RTI program, the only people left in that grouping are library assistants. Okay. So it has nothing to do with their performance. It has nothing to do, it's a contractual seniority issue that somewhere along the way it turned into something that we didn't want as far as those people in those positions. I don't see how, and we've already hired certified or some of the certified staff for this program as far as the certified teachers for different positions. If I saw that right on the...
Yeah, we have transferred some existing staff in there and hired some new staff.
But it still takes us back to that we're taking people that are good at their jobs and moving them out of their jobs because we're required to by contract, which is something that I think is wrong with the Speak contract. And I strongly recommend that the union and administration spend their time fixing during this contract negotiation. Can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, but we can prevent it from happening in the future. I would also strongly recommend that the administration look at the MTSS program, because it is my understanding that we're 4 people less in total bodies that are going to be providing those services in the grade school level. I wasn't here for the presentation last time, so I kind of, my fault. But the question, I would recommend that administration look at that program again closely before they start assigning positions to see if maybe we do need those 4 positions to help with the MTSS program. Because 4 bodies, I mean, that's a lot of hours that were being used that aren't. I don't know if that's valid or not, because I wasn't here for that. And the last thing that I would like to recommend that they look at during the union negotiation is that the teacher's contract, or the KEA contract, or maybe it's legal, I'm not sure which, has a clause that people that are well evaluated during their performance reviews sometimes have the opportunity to keep a position, whereas a lower rated teacher does not. Did I say that correctly?
For certified staff, the laws are incredibly different.
I understand that.
Yes.
But we are negotiating a contract that we can put, assuming that the union agrees to, whatever we want in. So that would be my recommendation.
Thank you.
But because of, I just can't support, I know that it's all legal and blah, blah, but I just can't support moving people that are good at their jobs out of their jobs. Even, I get it.
Thank you. Noted.
Other comments?
I guess I have kind of a newbie question. What happens if we were to not approve this and therefore be in violation of the contract? What then happens at that point?
Sorry, could you speak up? I can't
Sorry.
hear you. No worries.
If we were to not approve this tonight and therefore would be in violation of the contract, from my understanding, we're contractually bound to proceed with this, what happens to us?
There's probably a couple of different outcomes that could come from that. Probably the most immediate would be that we would have people who have not been reduced in force that don't have positions to do next year, because the position of the RTI assistant is not part of the programming for next year. If they were to stay, recall at the minimum staffing plan that the additional certified staff at the elementary level, the cost of that was offset by the reduction of the RTI assistants at the elementary level. So using $60,000 for a teacher, $30,000 for a paraprofessional, to not release those paraprofessionals would be an additional cost to the district of $270,000 next year.
Chris, you said they all have jobs somewhere, so that number is not.
That's embedded in the, so if we were fully staffed and had all our positions filled this year, there would be people who reduced and we wouldn't have positions for them. But because we are unfilled, we have positions for them. So if you think of it this way, we had 100, I'm just using round numbers, we had 100 people, we reduced to 9, we're at 91. We have 91 other positions, some filled and some not this year, that those people can go into. So we're truly at 91. If we were fully staffed and we reduce those people, we're still at 100 when we need to be at 91 because of the costs. So we're actually increasing the budget that we talked about at the minimum staffing plan.
Don't follow your
270?
logic.
Those 9 people, those dollars for the RTI assistants are being absorbed by the district to offset the cost of the MTSS certified staff.
But assuming that all of these people accept other jobs, we're still spending the same amount of money.
Not truly, because we don't have those positions filled right now. We haven't all year.
But we budgeted for them, so.
For those positions that have been unfilled, yes, not for the 10 RTI positions that are being reduced. It's an additional cost to the district.
And so if we were to fill all of the positions, then we would be nine heavy, like,
Correct, because we would still have those positions that the 9 people would move into still need to be filled next year.
Right, so the budget number is neutral.
So we'd have those people filled. The procedure of placement is a product of the RIF process, which is triggered by a state law, prescribed by the union contract. So we don't have an RTI position. So we would still have to find a place for those people, and we would still have to go through the reduction of force process in order to invoke the seniority component of the process to place those people. So the procedure of the RIF to then recall people and to allow those 4 most senior people within the classification access to jobs within the classification like you described, we still have to go through the RIF process. You can't just do that outside of the RIF process. That would be an unfair labor practice. You would not be following the contract.
Or the statute, really, when it comes
Correct.
down to it. I mean,
It's
the contract is governed by the statute above it that handles, that
Correct.
has the priority. So unless you change the law.
No, the point that I was arguing is if we have 9 jobs now and we have 9 jobs next year, same, and they pay the same, we're not saving or spending more money. It washes through the system.
If you recall in the minimum staffing plan, one of the final charts I showed was the number of certified staff, paraprofessional staff, or ESP staff, administrative staff, last year and next year. The next year ESP number was down by these 10 positions, offset by a communications director, so 9 total positions less next year. So our budget was 9 less because of this shift for next year. To keep them in, we still need the other however many people. We'd still have to fill them, those paraprofessionals in the other category. Many of them are for special ed programming or special ed IEP needs. Those positions still need to be filled. So we would have to fill those, plus we'd have these people sitting there that we don't have an assignment for within their category. And within their category, that's because it's not in there, that's why we have to conduct the RIF. They have rights. And they have rights to seniority within their classification, and then after that, within recall. It is an unenviable process. It's not something that we relish at all.
At a simplified level, we would be in violation of state law if we did not approve this. Is that correct?
IELRB, the union contract, variety of things. IELRB is the Illinois Employee Labor Relation Board.
further questions? Comments? Just- I know everybody, we've said it already, everybody knows this isn't easy. But we do have a recommendation here, and it appears that there's not any further discussion. So I move that the administration recommends that the Board of Education approve the resolution authorizing honorable dismissal of specific educational support personnel. Is there a second?
I'll second.
If we could have a roll call, please.
Mrs. Simmons.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Aye.
Mr. Mankowski.
Aye.
Mr. Carey.
No.
Dr. Lawler.
Abstain.
Motion carries 4-1-1.
Thank you.
So So now we are on J5, which is the COVID-19 mitigation plan update.
Yes, thank you. On February 14th, when we updated the mitigation plan for the district, one of the things we shared that we would do is bring a regular update to the Board of Education. This update and the last update, based on the current metrics, based on the data that we have, there is no recommended update or change to our mitigation plan moving forward. And the other thing I would share is we're going to continue to monitor through the rest of the year, and just almost a celebration in a way that there's only one other board meeting between now and the end of the year. So hopefully we'll have this conversation one more time to close out the school year with the recommendation that there aren't any changes because things are going well. So at this time, there are no recommendations, no shifts or adjustments, and we do have one more meeting on the 9th before our last day, which will be May 20th.
Excellent. Okay, move now to the superintendent and board report.
Yes, thank you. In your email, I believe you should have received the IASB resolution information. As you recall, annually in June and July, we get the resolutions via email through the board, and then the board takes some time over the summer and early fall to discuss the voting options, to discuss the resolutions, and then whoever our representative, it's been Mr. Gonzalez last year, whoever our representative is at the IASB makes the voting on behalf of our board. So what I would like to do is, if you would, please review that email that you received, and I will plan to bring a new business item at the next meeting. I'll review the timeline again. I think it's the end of June when any new resolutions need to be submitted. I'll look and get feedback from the board. If there are any ideas for resolutions that our board has, I'll make sure we have a new business item to consider that, talk through that process, and officially submit that. Because I know one of the things when our board had the conversation last year, the question was, how do we go about the process of submitting a resolution? And it would be between now and June, that process in which to do so. So I'll re-forward that email, and if there is a topic that you have, please let me know. And if there are topics that the board wants to consider or somebody would like to shape or come up with language for that, I'll include that as a new business item at a future meeting.
May I ask a quick question?
Yes.
Is it on us to come up with the actual language, or is that something that Maureen typically would handle when it comes down to actually writing what we're going to submit?
We can work on that together. Yep, we can work on it administratively and with our legal counsel, because there will be parts of it and many pieces of the recommendation that do have qualifying statute or code inclusion that we would make sure it's fully vetted and properly done. So if you have that, please let me know. Two more items, or a couple more items. Last week we had both FPC and CAC meetings. We were fortunate, both times we met over at the campus to talk through the Ignite Learning Academy. Laura Garland, who presented at the board at the last meeting, was there and answered a number of questions. There is an open house this week. It's either tomorrow or Wednesday. I don't remember which night.
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow night.
Yep.
Tomorrow night here at Harder, another open house to answer more questions. CAC also talked about topics for next year, because in lieu of a February meeting, I did a CAC survey, and some of the feedback that I received from survey numbers that the COVID did impact some of their attendance over the last 2 years. The respondents, the vast majority want to meet back in person regularly, so we will do that and conduct that as long as we can. We do have 2 members that will be stepping off, and in addition, we will be adding some new topics and potentially moving our location to moving the location from the high school to different buildings around the district, so that way people can see what the middle school looks like, they can see the Fox Valley Career Center again on a tour, and maybe some of the elementary schools, so they can look at different programs and different projects that we've updated. So we will do that. And in addition, we do have an email that we should have finalized and go out tomorrow. It's the time of year when we look for new members for FAC, FPC, and CAC. So you'll see that email tomorrow, and in the link we'll have a little description, or in the email we'll have a description of all of the different committees, the work the committee does, and then a link that they can directly apply for that. And we'll have that open through, I think, the last week in May, end of the school year, and then we'll contact any interested individuals for next year for inclusion into FPC, CAC, or FPC, or FAC. Another reminder is we finally met with our CEC, Consortium for Educational Change, to talk about REV, which is Respect, Equity, and Value. We got some feedback. The information packet that we shared at FPC and CAC is in your board packet. It's a preliminary findings, and we still need to go one step further. So the core team that kind of initiated this for Kaneland will re-meet, look at the findings, and then take those findings and then determine our next step. So rather than talk through these findings, what we'd rather do is wait till after the core team meets again and then bring more of a presentation to the board, sharing what the next steps will look like. And one of our findings is that a number of the findings from REV will be more easily integrated into Kaneland Connects, into the 5 commitment levels. So you may see REV still regularly talked about, but rather than a core team by itself, after a period of time that the program is developed, will be implemented into Kaneland Connects as part of the strategic plan, and each of the commitments can look at REV and equity along the lines of the strategic plan. But that's still work that has to be done, and a presentation to be brought back, and then eventually share all of the findings, because we got very verified data as far as how many students took the survey, how many teachers took it, how many parents took it. So we have a lot of that data that we can share based on what those findings are, and be able to at least start with a baseline understanding of where we are as we move forward. Questions?
And you guys got good numbers for your focus groups, looks like.
We did.
Are you hoping for more? Or
Always hoping for more, so we can get a greater cross-section. And again, we'll share that data, but one of the pieces in there was the survey information was pretty good, or the survey turnout was pretty good. The teacher portion of the focus groups, that was probably the lowest of the groups, and I think the challenge was either on-site or in person, the timing after school of being able to attend. So that's one of the things that we'll look at is what do we need to do that's different? And I think the other piece that we're finding as a parent, what we're seeing in our schools right now, some of it is still an offshoot of what we saw 2 years ago when we started REV, but also some things have changed. Some things have changed within our schools, things have changed with students, some student needs, and we've shared that through behavior facilitators and additional counselors. So we will see some of our same data, some of our same findings, but also update it to what is going on exactly right now with our students, so we're not, and our staff and our family members, so that we're not missing the target. And those were my updates. Thank you.
Okay. Dr. Fuchs?
Yep, I just have one tonight. This afternoon, Dr. Layton, Mrs. Maris, Mr. Payton, and Mr. Rollman and I met with E.O. Sullivan. E.O. Sullivan is our consultant for the KHS long-range facility planning communication with our community. Today, the purpose of today's meeting was to begin to develop the messaging to make sure that we are clear in our communications. Our next meeting will be in a month or so to develop the menu of options from the plan itself, and then we'll be inviting others to take surveys and participate, make sure we've got the right information to get out to our community. So it did take us a little while to get the meeting on the books, but we're happy that to be able to have it done today.
This table keeps squeaking. Table keeps squeaking.
Oh. Okay, board members, anything? Just want to remind anybody who hasn't filed their economic interest statement to do so by May 1st. May 1st, May 15th. I think it's
15th.
Due the 1st, but not late until after. It's kind of like your car payment.
Yep, and if there's any questions, let me know and I can assist.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Topics for future agendas.
I have one.
Okay.
It's nebulous, though. Part of my frustration with the RIF process is that we have had things that have happened over the course of the years, and it's hard to keep track of how all of those pieces fit together. And I know we have a standard calendar that we progress through every year. It's been the same calendar since I've been on the board. I think maybe, and I don't know if this is during a summer retreat or what, the board sits down and looks at how those pieces are grouped together to see if we can't find a more coherent way for someone like me to follow, like 6 steps later, why we're doing what we're doing. If that makes sense.
So you want to change the
No,
calendar process, or you just want to know where to find the historical information?
I want to, we have a pretty prescribed yearly repetitive calendar. I'd like to sit down as a group, look at that calendar, and see if we want to make changes to what comes when. And I know some of it's legal or a lot of it is, but I'd still like to go through it.
And reference it to the statute?
Well, no, reference it to,
What dates, in other words, what dates are required by when, according to the statute?
no, more so, well, that we have to do, but
I
also.
think that's on there for,
Yeah.
well, sort of, some of it.
I don't know, reference the budget to the staffing plan so we can see how the two fit together more. I don't have it defined. It just seems like some of the things we do are very disjointed, and I would like to go through the calendar, see if we can tie them together a little bit better.
So I feel like I've seen, like, is the
Budget
calendar
calendar.
something
Yeah.
that is, okay, I know it's ours and we have our own, but isn't some of it prescribed by, does press recommend, is it press who does that, or who?
No, IASBO does.
IASBO, okay, I
Yeah.
knew somebody recommended
Yeah. But
certain
what I
things be
did is
discussed at certain times. So I'm not saying we can't discuss them, I'm just adding that in there.
I guess what I'm thinking is like, we have.
So
this-
some of it's best practice.
We had the minimum staffing plan that was for certified staff, and tying that back to the programming, tying that to the budget, tying it all together. Maybe it's a presentation on how it all works together, so that it's not just, you learn by experience that this follows that. Maybe it's an educational piece. I don't know exactly what it looks like, but I just feel like we need to be more in control of what the board does as a board and in what order those things come together, so we can tie it together better. And
Okay.
I hope I made sense along the way there.
I would just add, I think it would help me too. I think probably even just the newer board members, not to speak for you guys, but for myself, I know I was told a year or two later, you'll start picking up on things, but like Mr. Carey just mentioned, if there was something a presentation or something that connects the dots, that maybe would help trigger a little bit better. So like when we're doing something, it would trigger, oh, this is why we're going to be talking about this in 2 months or something, or this will, I think for me, that would be helpful too.
Typically, I put the budget calendar on consent, but perhaps it's time to kind of review that in a new business item to help connect the dots.
Yeah, because the budget,
Because
the budget
it-
plan affects
yeah.
the staffing plan, affects the
Yep.
summer projects, to just
Everything.
kind of tie
Yeah.
it together.
It doesn't always follow a fiscal year that you would see in other businesses.
None of it
Because of
makes
the
sense.
timeline.
Right.
Yeah, none of this makes sense as a normal business would operate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just as a formality, we do a thumbs up on those kind of things, thumbs down. Looks like we've got them all, so we're good.
Yep. And then before we bring it, I will, as I've done with other people that have initiated the idea, follow through. So Ryan, if I have additional questions, and
Feel free.
I'll use Ryan as a resource to put it together to bring back to the board.
That sounds great.
So thank you.
Anything else? Okay, so this is the second opportunity for public comment. Following the same rules as previously, 3-minute limit, half an hour limit for all of it, and there is and so we'll go by the sign-up sheet. And the first speaker is Scott Stallcup.
Hi, Scott Stalkup from Sugar Grove. I have 3 kids in the district. Couple of things. The lighting that was discussed at length earlier, let me say I think you guys made the right decision by doing it, and I'll give you a few reasons. The electrical labor goes up a percentage every year, already contracted through their union, etc. Materials and wiring are continuing to go up. I am in the industry nationwide, so I have experience. I'm just not talking. There are some things that I wasn't privy to and I don't know that I would ask some questions on. One, what are the manufacturers you're using? Are there others? A lot of these specialized things are single source spec. You open that up, you can gain some competitiveness to it sometimes without losing quality. Also, you can generally buy extended warranties. I know that was a topic. So you could pre-purchase that, assign that to an electrical contractor down the road. Some people hesitate on that, but it is done. I've seen it, I've been involved in it. I would question the wiring that was discussed, why it is being replaced. LED draws less power than current, incandescent, lithium, whatever light you have in there. So with less draw, why is the wiring being replaced? Generally, copper doesn't go bad. So I would ask that question. Maybe it's an opportunity to do some value engineering. Maybe not. With regards to the librarians, a couple of things I'm curious about. First is, I believe a notice was sent out to the librarians before a board vote. I'm curious how that happens. So, and likewise, the handbook was to a board vote and there was no public review of that through the CAC or anybody else. So the board's voting on things. It kind of seems disingenuous to me. Back to the librarians, my other question with this is, who is going to staff the libraries? Are the libraries in the schools just going to be closed now? I think there's more information that needs to be provided as parents, you're just cutting 9 positions for legal reasons because it's contract. I get that. Not happy about it because they've made impact on my kids, but I think you need to follow up and say, here's how we're going to do this with staffing the libraries, with who these people are, etc. And maybe that's forthcoming. And then with the Ignite, I'm curious for some more information tomorrow. I will be attending that. I did go through one, and I'm very curious about hearing more about that and seeing how that's funded and how that's going to be implemented. So, thank you.
Thank you for your comments. The second speaker is Tonya Grossinger. I guess I didn't watch the time, did I?
That was close.
Oh, okay.
That was good.
Okay, so I just want to ask everybody a question, obviously rhetorical since you can't answer me, but 4 years ago I moved here, and when I moved here, the biggest reason I did was for the school district. The ratings at the time were really, really good. The high school had an 8 out of 10 rating. In the 4 years that I've lived here, the high school's rating has dropped to 5 out of 10. The reason I say this is because on Thursday last week, I was at the CAC meeting and I got to listen more in depth, I guess, on the presentation about Ignite Academy, which instead of answering more questions, just created more for me, unfortunately. So I will also be attending tomorrow night. But one of the questions that was asked by a fellow CAC member was, are we spreading ourselves too thin? We've gone from 8 out of 10 to a 5 out of 10 in 4 years. We have parents, students, staff constantly saying stuff about SBG and it needing to be fixed and revamped, not gotten rid of, but something needs to happen with that. I have parents calling me. I was on the phone with a mother today for 2 hours because of something that happened with her daughter and her daughter's grade. grades, automatically making her ineligible for sports that they had no idea of because there was no knowledge brought to the parent or to the student. And when the mom is reaching out to staff, she's getting ignored. And so she's called me out of frustration. And yet we have this happening. Now we have Ignite happening, which again posed far more questions for me than answers. One of them was, Kaneland has thrown out this word of this, I don't want to say just a word, but this idea of everything being equitable. How is what's happening at Ignite Academy equitable to any of the other schools in our district? We want personalized learning, and I was told, well, this is the hope of putting it towards all of the schools in the district. We're going to start here and hopefully branch it out. Why do we have to start at a brand new school? We can't maintain the facilities we have now. We're talking about three parking lots needing to be completely revamped, and yet and lighting in a current auditorium. But let's bring on another school. And I get it's part of the Fox Valley Career Center anyway, but we're bringing on more to just add more to the budget and more to this. We're hiring and I don't want to say firing, but terminating and moving and shifting all these staff. Where's the staff coming from with this? We've had a difficult time getting transportation and teaching staff as it is. And now let's just add another school. Where's the equity in it though? If we're doing personalized learning, just bring it to all of the schools. Don't just pick one school, a brand new one at that in particular, and put it there. So I have far more questions, and I do wonder, are we stretching ourselves thin?
Thank you. Are there any other public comments? There's no one else signed up. Yes. Whoops.
Kristen Stalcup, Sugar Grove, 3 kids in the district. First, I wanted to say, Mr. Carey, I really appreciate you adding to a new agenda later down the road the concept of making sure everything connects to each other, because I will say there have been a few board meetings this year where I feel like information is presented and I watch the board ask all kinds of questions and feel totally divided and then vote for it anyway because it has to be done. And I wish that there are times where maybe that presentation, if the time limit says you have to have it by May 1st, well, maybe we don't do it at the April 25th meeting. Maybe we do it at the April 11th meeting. So if there's too many questions, you can revisit it before legally it says it has to be done. It might also allow for the community to understand what's going on. And it will allow for some of you guys to get more questions answered, because I know there's been times where I feel like, there's a lack of information in order to actually make these decisions. The other thing I wanted to say with MTSS and SBG and the concept of MTSS, I understand. I like it. I like that it's going to, the idea of it, be able to reach your low kids and your high kids and everyone in between. My biggest concern is that SBG doesn't grade and in a student's eyes doesn't make daily work, homework, worth anything. And I would think that would be one of your easiest ways for a teacher to catch that a child is behind or ahead on a subject. Because if their daily work, if they're getting everything super easy, well, maybe they need the MTSS to push them forward. If they're failing all their daily work, maybe they need the MTSS to help boost them. But if they're missing that component, by the time the teacher figures it out at the summative, which is the only thing being graded, it's too late. The unit's over. And I say that because I have a 6th grader who's in the thick of SBG. I have a teacher who reached out to me telling me that my student didn't have daily work turned in. I go to my student, ask him about his daily work, tell him that it's going to be all done this weekend, it's going to be all turned in on Tuesday, and his response to me is, "But Mom, it doesn't matter." I have a teacher who says it matters. He has parents who say it matters. But right now, the system says it doesn't matter. In order for our kids to succeed, you need the teachers, you need the parents, and you need them to be a team. But you need the system to help that team, because the ultimate goal is for our students to succeed. And if you have a system that is working against the teachers and the parents, it makes it that much more difficult for our kids to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other public comments? Okay, hearing none, I will move forward. We do have a closed session tonight to discuss, under the Illinois Open Meetings Act, Section 2C9, student disciplinary cases, Section 2C1, which is appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees, and 2C2, which is collective negotiating matters. We do anticipate action after closed session. So once the closed session has concluded, we will come back into this room, reopen an open session, and we will take action at that time. So logistically, the board, if anybody was wanting to wait around to hear the action that happens afterwards, the board will be moving from this room to another room to have closed session so people could stay in this room, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then the live stream goes on hold until we're done and we come back in, and then it's added in at the end. So I will entertain a motion to go into closed session.
So moved. Second.
And a roll call, please.
Mrs. Witt?
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez?
Aye.
Mr. Carey?
Aye.
Dr. Lawler?
Aye.
Mr. Mankivsky?
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons?
Aye.
Motion carries. 1, 2, 3, 6, 0.
Science classroom right across the hallway.
is Kaneland School Board meeting. We are reconvening in open session. And first, I move that the Kaneland Board of Education postpones
Seeking a legal review.
the first action for student 2021-2022-02 pending legal review.
I'll second.
And a roll call, please.
Mrs. Witt?
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez?
Aye.
Mr. Carey?
Aye.
Dr. Lawler?
Aye.
Mr. Mankivsky?
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries 6-0. I also move that we elect Julie Orfel as Secretary Pro Tem.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Absolutely. Mr. Gonzalez?
Aye.
Mr. Carey?
Aye.
Dr. Lawler?
Aye.
Mr. Mankivsky?
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons?
Aye.
Mrs. Witt, did we get me?
Oh, Mrs. Witt, sorry.
Aye, motion carries 6-0. Okay, now we're going to go into the other, okay, so I move that the Kaneland Board of Education determines that there was not a violation of Policy 280E in grievance matter 2021-2022-03.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Gonzalez?
Aye.
Mr. Carey?
Aye.
Dr. Lawler?
Aye.
Mr. Mankivsky?
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons?
Aye.
Mrs. Witt?
Aye. Motion carries 6-0. I move that the Kaneland Board of Education determines that there was not a violation of Policy 280E in grievance matter 2021-2022-04.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Carey?
Aye.
Dr. Lawler?
Aye.
Mr. Mankivsky?
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons?
Aye.
Mrs. Witt?
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez?
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0. I move that the Kaneland Board of Education determines that there was not a violation of Policy 280E in grievance matter 2021-2022-05.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Carey?
Aye.
Dr. Lawler?
Aye.
Mr. Mankivsky?
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons?
Aye.
Mrs. Witt?
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez?
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0. I move that the Kaneland Board of Education determines that there was not a violation of Policy 2260 in grievance matter 2021-2022-06.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Dr. Lawler?
Aye.
Mr. Mankivsky?
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons?
Aye.
Mrs. Witt?
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez?
Aye.
Mr. Carey?
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0. I move that the Kaneland Board of Education determines that there was not a violation of Policy 280E in grievance matter 2021-2022-07.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Mankivsky?
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons?
Aye.
Mrs. Witt?
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez?
Aye.
Mr. Carey?
Aye.
Dr. Lawler?
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0. I move that the Kaneland Board of Education determines that there was not a violation of Policy 280E in grievance matter 2021-2022-08.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Simmons?
Aye.
Mrs. Witt?
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez?
Aye.
Mr. Carey?
Aye.
Dr. Lawler?
Aye.
Mr. Mankivsky?
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0. I move that the Kaneland Board of Education determines that there was not a violation of Policy 280E in grievance matter 2021-2022-09.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Witt?
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez?
Aye.
Mr. Carey?
Aye.
Dr. Lawler?
Aye.
Mr. Mankivsky?
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons?
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0. I move that the Kaneland Board of Education determines that there was not a violation of Policy 280E in grievance matter 2021-2022-10.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Gonzalez?
Aye.
Mr. Carey?
Aye.
Dr. Lawler?
Aye.
Mr. Mankivsky?
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons?
Aye.
Mrs. Witt?
Aye. Motion carries 6-0. I move that the Kaneland Board of Education determines that there was not a violation of Policy 280E in grievance matter 2021-2022-11.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Carey?
Aye.
Dr. Lawler?
Aye.
Mr. Mankivsky?
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons?
Aye.
Mrs. Witt?
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez?
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0. I move that the Kaneland Board of Education determines that there was not a violation of Policy 280E in grievance matter 2021-2022-12.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Carey?
Aye.
Dr. Lawler?
Aye.
Mr. Mankivsky?
Aye.
Mrs. Witt?
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons?
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez?
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0. So all of our
Yes.
business, okay. It is now 10:36, and I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
You get the 11th one in.
We stand adjourned.